Hi, my name is Mike and I am one of the education consultants here at the Profs, specialising mainly in mathematics, computer science and physics. In this video I get to talk about one of the universities I went to study one of my 4 master's degrees in mathematics, and that is Cambridge. But not specifically about how to get into Cambridge for any one particular course. I'm actually going to be talking about how to perform well on the CSAT, or the Computer Science Aptitude Test. Now, this is a test that is taken by select computer science applicants going to particular colleges. It's not something that is offered everywhere, and it's perhaps the admissions test that has perhaps the least amount of information available online to be able to prepare for it. It's typically offered by some of the more popular colleges, or the royal ones, although it does change year on year as to who actually requires the CSAT for entrance. At the moment, it's going to be Peterhouse and Trinity, if you're looking at going to those, and it's something you usually take after you've had your interview. So in this video, I'm hoping to go over my top 5 tips as to how to perform well in such a test. So my first tip with this test is that it's not a computer science test, it is a maths test. So what you really want to be doing before you do this is make sure that you are completely up to date with your understanding of A-level mathematics. In fact, at this level, I would actually go as far as to say, if you're like a few months ahead of having your interview, maybe even have the whole of A-level maths already understood. We're looking not even just at the University of Cambridge, but colleges that might actually have the largest pool of applicants that perhaps go for the colleges. So it's extremely competitive. The best way of being able to really get ready for this is making sure that you're exposed to as much mathematics as possible. So I'd say, as a very, very minimum requirement for this, actually have the whole of A-level mathematics understood, and perhaps a little bit of further maths. There are a few topics in there that are also really, really important to be able to get an understanding of that aren't covered in A-levels. So I know number theory in particular is something that does come up in a few of the problems within that paper, and even sort of varying across different boards like AQA and OCR and Excel, number theory only really comes up as a further maths topic. It definitely helps to look over a few papers just to be able to get an idea of the content that is covered. Maybe create a little bit of a checklist for yourself to see actually what mathematics is covered on the test and what you should know. But at the very least, before you even begin this, you've got to make sure you've got that very strong foundation of mathematics already set. Moving on to tip number 2, my second tip on doing well on a test like this is really develop your problem solving abilities. You'll find that with a test like this, a lot of the questions are going to feel very open-ended, actually, if you have a look at what the papers look like. And what Cambridge are really looking for is your ability to develop a nice thought-out answer with a clear logical argument. There's lots of different examples that you can find of people doing this in literature. So, for example, The Art of Problem Solving by Richard Ruskzik, just getting that name down, and Problem Solving Strategies by Arthur Engel. They're really, really good books to get you started on this if you haven't had a lot of practice in sort of using mathematics outside of your set curriculum. So definitely have a read through those questions to be able to get an understanding of how to develop a proof, how to develop a derivation. The best 6 answers that you have on these papers are going to be what get you through. And it's better to be able to choose one thing, really take that time to develop it. It certainly helps if you already understand what that kind of an answer looks like, and those would be sort of books I recommend, but it doesn't necessarily have to be books. You can look at past paper solutions for competitions too, so particularly in things like the British Mathematical Olympiad, round 1, maybe round 2. They're going to be very, very tough questions, but the most important thing that you really need to do at, say, an earlier stage is know what kind of length of an answer you're hoping to be able to achieve or give, or level of detail. Just to be able to compare it to what's on the paper, though, there is a CSAT website where they actually do offer past paper solutions with this, and if you actually look for those, they aren't very long, but they feel quite innovative, and they usually present answers in its barest form. What you want to be able to do is make sure that your workings are clear. You might want to add a little bit of extra justification or information on this. So again, do look at more complicated questions to build up your familiarity with developing problems and derivations. Moving on to tip number 3, I usually say this with every test: make sure you try to practice a paper like this under timed conditions. In terms of the amount of time that you have for a test like this, you usually have 3 hours to do all of the questions, and then you have maybe another half an hour to sort of upload your workings and materials. This is usually an online test that you are taking here. The tricky thing with this is that actually when you look at information at the CSAT, they do offer a few sample papers, but not a lot of resources in terms of official papers, given that only so few colleges use this test to be able to distinguish between their computer science candidates. In fact, on that point, is a test usually taken after you've had your interview, so in that sense, it's something that is incredibly exclusive. There might not be a lot of information openly to the public about how to get ready for these. My recommendation, having worked with students already on these tests, is actually looking into like step 1, step 2 papers. If you have about 6 questions, you might want to have about half an hour for each question, maybe just as an example to be able to split up your time. If you are able to do that, you are ensuring that you have a very good balance between getting as many questions as possible in, whilst also having a good amount of detail in the answers that you provide. Remember, we've got to have really clear, well-reasoned arguments for what you think an answer is, or a derivation in terms of, actually what the answer to a particular problem presented is. And you need to be able to balance your time correctly to do that. It takes a little bit of practice, but I would recommend perhaps trying to look at individual step 1. Step 1 doesn't really exist anymore. It's an old paper, but it's a good level for you to be able to work on as a computer scientist. And then maybe some step 2 papers will be helpful for this as well. But I would try, if you're looking at those, to look at doing questions within half an hour to get ready for something like the CSAT. Now, tip number 4 is a little bit more of a tip on emphasis. Show the logic in your reasoning. Even at A-level standard, I've seen initially quite a few students that might actually write a little bit of mathematics or as a fact, and then jump to another step, and I'd be like, well, how did you make that jump, and why? And the very biggest cliche sort of thing that you might hear from people is that imagine that you're speaking to somebody who had no understanding about the underlying mathematics or the logic of something, and you had to go through step by step sort of how to get from A to B to C and so on. How would you do it? It's handy to be able to do this maybe if you have a family member or a friend that doesn't do mathematics, that doesn't feel too intimidated by things like mathematics perhaps. Obviously you have to be wary that people might be scared of this to be able to practice this with, but your arguments, they need to be logical, they need to follow one from another. You can't necessarily quote a fact necessarily or quote an assumption based on maybe how a geometrical problem looks. So for instance, if I had something that looked like a right angle but wasn't declared to be one, without necessarily reasoning, maybe looking at congruence or similarity of triangles, I can't make that deduction, right? The more reasoning you give, the stronger you look as an applicant. And it's the same kind of thing that they're going to be looking for interviews as well in terms of accountability for your knowledge. And my last tip in this video in terms of how to get ready for this test is stay resilient. And this is more of a pastoral thing. It's a hard test. And what you want to be able to do is, other than practice a lot, is learn to stay calm under pressure. Everyone is going to be finding this test very, very tricky. It's not something you have to get 100% in order to be able to get onto a course like this. And if you're already at this stage, you know that you're already doing very, very well. They just want to have a little bit of information to be able to sort of distinguish you from maybe not too many other computer science applicants for that college. Even if you don't do well there, you might well be assigned to a different college at Cambridge for computer science anyway. So it's more of a privilege to be able to take a test like this, and even more so, it's fun. They've got some very interesting problems on there if you have a look at their sample papers, and I would personally be very, very grateful for the opportunity should I be in that position. So that is the end of the video. If you liked what you've heard and you like what you've seen, then please like and subscribe. Again, we are really keen to know whether this is helpful for you, so any feedback is really useful. If you have a friend or family member that is interested or in a similar position to what I've just mentioned or has to take the CSAT themselves, then do share this with them. Or if you have something to say, or if you have any additional tips that you might be able to give for somebody that's getting ready for this CSAT, then say something maybe in the comments section. We'd love to hear what you think. We'd love to be able to sort of continue this on and sort of spread more awareness wherever possible with something like this. But beyond that, maybe more generally, if you're looking at applying for Cambridge itself, then get in touch with our consultants, maybe somebody like me, or maybe one of our over 1,000 other professional consultants who've either sort of had incredible academic achievements or a lot of industry experience. And take a look at the information on screen. You can get in touch with us right away should you have any questions. But if we don't hear from you, best of luck with your CSAT. Congratulations if you're actually in this position. It's a hard test, but have a lot of fun with it. And we hope to hear from you soon.